Hey, welcome. Today I am doing a paper 3 multiple choice question walkthrough. I'm looking at the specimen question, paper AQA. Got the link where you can download the solutions below, and hopefully that's really helpful to you. Okay, question 1. Which of the following is a true statement about average fixed costs? Watch out for this. Here they're talking about average fixed costs. Average fixed costs are total costs divided by quantity, total fixed costs. A is wrong. A is actually talking about fixed costs. Don't get caught out by that. Fixed costs don't change as output changes. So this is always the same as output changes. But as output changes, this increases. So average fixed cost will always decrease. And if you have questions about it, you could draw up a table where you see that kind of happening. Imagine as output increases and your fixed costs are always the same. Imagine they're always 10. If you then calculated the average fixed cost, you would get infinity, 10, 5, and 3.3-ish. So average fixed cost always fall as output increases. Okay, a supply side policy, I'm looking for something that shifts the AS. So something that shifts that long run AS curve to the right. And that's determined by things like the quantity of the factors of production available or the quality of them. So anything kind of like technology, for example, that can affect the quality of capital, or education that could affect the quality of education. So the only one that seems to kind of fit into that really easily is D. This one's a great question. Love this one, total utility. Here they're asking about something about marginal utility. They're asking about that. So the equation for marginal utility, you need to do your change in your total utility and then divide that by the change in your quantity. So as I change my quantity from 1 to 2, utility changes by 80. So the marginal utility would be 80 divided by the change in the quantity, which is just 1. 80 divided by 1 gives me a marginal utility of 80. And then repeat for 2 to 3. The change is 70. So 70 divided by 1 is 70. Next one is 50, and then it's 30. So the fourth chocolate bar, adding the fourth chocolate bar means going from 250 to 300. So your marginal utility is 50. So B is the answer. Here we have a monopsony graph, and we're looking at the profit maximization. How many people should they employ? So like any other company, they profit maximize by setting MC equal to MR. Here it's the labor market, so the revenue really is best measured by that. So I've set that here, and that's how many people they will hire. So I'm looking for anything that has that in it. So I'm between, cross those ones out, I'm between A and C. And the monopsony, remember, they're quite a powerful company. They can really push their employees to accept really low wages because their employees don't really have any other options. So it's a mistake to think that they'll pay them W3 when workers would actually be very happy to accept any wage that matches their supply curve. And the example has been quite tricky here. But the average cost of labor, that's actually the supply curve. And if you remember from year 1 micro, a supply curve already shows the minimum you are willing and able to accept. So these L1 workers, company's going to think, okay, what's the minimum that I can pay them? So they go up to the supply curve, which already shows the minimum, and it hires them at W1. So A is the answer. If you have any questions, send me an email to inquiries. Got that link below, and I'll see if I can help you out with that one. Here we have a depreciation of the pound. The pound can buy less dollars, so that's called a depreciation. So we have before, £1 buys $2, and we have now £1 buys $1.50. So the pound buys less, US dollars. This is called the depreciation of the pound relative to the US dollar. Right, if this happens, if you think of something like exports, the UK has a Mini Cooper, for example. Imagine they export them for £30,000. The US dollar price of this used to be 60,000. And now it is 45,000. So as you can see, exports are cheaper for the foreign consumer. I spelled that wrong. So A is immediately wrong. That's totally the wrong way around. Because exports are cheaper, you should sell more exports, and this should help increase your AD. So it's actually going to help you recover from an economic cycle. So it should increase your level of output. So that's the wrong way around too. And if you increase your AD, you should have demand pull inflation. So C looks like a possibility. Right, light bulbs. We're being told that they are a normal good. Normal goods, to kind of refresh you on these, as your income increases, you want to demand more. So we've seen here that there's a shift right for these normal goods, these light bulbs. So one of the reasons could be because there's increased income. And it's really convenient. Here they've actually given that as a response. A is the answer. Distribution of income. You may have studied this when you looked at the Lorenz curve, which looked kind of like that. You had kind of the percentage of the population here, and you had the percentage of income here. And then this thing called the Gini coefficient used to measure the level of inequality. So you'd take this area A, and you'd take this area B, and the Gini coefficient was doing A divided by A plus B. That's what the Gini coefficient does, and it will actually measure your inequality. I've got a little bit more information on that in the solutions below if you want some extra pointers with that one. Right, this one, it's just memorizing what shifts your short run AS. So an increase in raw material prices is going to make firms less able to produce at each price. So in other words, their supply curve is going to shift left. At each prior price, say P1, they are now supplying less than they did before. So S1 moves to S2, and this is macro, so this is your short run AS2 and your short run AS1. So for that increase in raw materials, we want that short run AS to shift to left. An increase in income taxes, that's different, that's separate. If you increase income taxes, consumers are going to have less money left over after taxes. This is called their disposable income. That's going to mean that they can consume less. So if consumers consume less, C decreases, that means AD decreases. So I'm looking for that combination, the short run AS shifting left and the AD decreasing. That seems to work. That's the wrong way around. None of these work so far. That shifts left, AD decreases, C is the answer. Okay, this is just memorizing things. What shifts your short run AS left? Simply increase costs of production. And you might get that because of higher taxes, higher wages. So actually we see that A is the answer. A, wages have been increasing. So that's going to mean it's more expensive for the company to run their business and produce their goods. These ones are great fun. These ones can be a really challenging topic. But the principle with what you'll learn that the questions are kind of the same. So to improve allocation of resources, you want to either reduce consumption of a harmful good. So a harmful good will be something that has a social cost higher than any social benefit. And if you reduce the consumption of that, that would be really great. Or you could increase consumption of a good that's good for others. That would be if the social benefit is higher than the social cost. So let's take a look at what X offers in terms of social benefits and social costs. So for those of you that are not aware, you could calculate your social benefit by doing your marginal private benefit plus your marginal external benefit. Move this one here. And your marginal external benefit, this is your externality. That's your externality. Right, so X has a private benefit of 200 and then external benefits of 50. So it adds 250 benefits to society. But to work out how much it's costing, go through the same process. Right, so for costs, marginal private cost plus marginal external cost. Go through this again if you download the solutions. So the private costs are 200, the external costs are 90, giving you a total cost of 290. So this good X is actually quite harmful when we put an unhappy face. It's harming people because it's harming them at 290, but only benefiting them at 50. So overall, this is reducing welfare by 40. So it's quite damaging good. You don't really want to have much of product X. So I'm looking for the options that tax X. If you tax X, you reduce the consumption of X. And that's really what we're looking for because this good is harming people. So less of it will mean less harm. And let's go through the same process for Y. Let's figure out what is it adding in terms of benefits and costs to society. So again, if I add these two up, I will get the total social benefit. So that seems to add 110 to benefits, but it also costs society 100. So here you're adding 110 to benefits, but you're costing society 100. So overall, there's a net gain of 10. So if you were to consume this good, it's going to add 10 more benefits to society than cost. So that way, you're going to increase your welfare by 10, which is really good. So you definitely want to have more Y. I'm going to put a really kind of happy face that you want to have more of that. And one of the ways to get more product Y is to give it a subsidy. So then A is the answer. This one's a really tricky one. I think some of the challenges is you're not really expecting all these kind of really finance-specific terms thrown at you all in one go. So I think the challenge with this is to know your definitions. So your balances at the Bank of England is just like a bank account where whatever money you put into the bank account is there to be withdrawn immediately whenever you want to. So this you can immediately kind of withdraw. Treasury bills, these are a type of bonds. These are bonds, but they're kind of short-term bonds. These are bonds that if you buy them, you'll only hold them for 1 year max, really, and you'll get all your money back after 1 year. You could also sell these bonds pretty easily. They're really usually always quite in demand, and that means you could always quite easily convert it to cash. So this is fairly liquid. I'm going to say you could easily convert it to cash. Your government bonds are the same, but they're just longer. They're usually around 10-year mark plus. So it's not really liquid itself. You've got to wait 10 years until you get your money back that you lent out to the government. However, you could always sell it, meaning it's not really that illiquid. You could always sell the bond. And finally, are these advances. Advances are a little bit less liquid than a government bond because they're like a form of loans. If you have an advance, you've given a loan, and you only get that money on a specific date. So it's not really very easy to sell. It's not really a loan either. So A is right. You can see you go from instant cash to it takes less time to turn into cash. Okay, comparative advantage was all about specializing in what you have comparative advantage. And the idea, if you do that, your PPF is going to shift out and your country will be better off because you've traded. But to be able to do that, you need to specialize in what you have comparative advantage. And comparative advantage was all about having the lowest opportunity cost to produce that good compared to another country. So you can only really get these benefits of comparative advantage in trading if you first specialize in the good you have comparative advantage. So it needs to just meet that definition. That's what they're testing you on here. To work out the change in the exchange rate, you want to use your percentage change equation. So the percentage change in the exchange rate, you do your new one minus your old one divided by your old one times 100. I always remember it like, imagine you're saying no. I'll explain that one. So here you've said you've got N and then O is the next one. And yeah, so it just kind of spells out you're saying no against. I know it can be tricky to remember which way around it is. So that's something that some people find helpful. So to work out that percentage change, the new value is now 100. So we're going from 2010 to 2012. The old one is 125 divided by 125 times that by 100. If you do this, you'll get minus 20%. The exchange rate they should put a negative, but that's declined by 20%. Right, so what can make your exchange rate fall? To make your exchange rate fall, it's just demand and supply. So a fall in the price of an exchange rate, you would like either less demand or more supply. So let's think how interest rates would affect exchange rates. If interest rates increase, any money saved into, let's assume this is into country X, will get you a higher return. This is really attractive for international investors wanting to get the maximum return on their money. They look at country X. They've got a really high interest rate. They can deposit their money into country X's banks. And that way, they'll be making more money. So foreign investors are attracted to depositing money in country X, which is going to mean in the process, you can only really put money in country X in country X currency. So in this process, the investors will have had to demand country X currency. So in other words, there's an increase in demand. And if you increase the demand, the price of the exchange rate increases. So A is wrong because A would lead to an increase in the price and you want to decrease the price. So the answer must be B. But to explain this one, imagine another country had a higher interest rate. The investors would go to the other countries. As the investors go to the other countries, they're going to sell their pounds or whatever this country X is because they want to buy the currency of the other country so that they can open bank accounts in the other country and they can save their money in the other bank account. But for the local economy, this should decrease the price of your exchange rate. So that's why B is the answer. Okay, property rights. These are pieces of paper that tell you very clearly who owns that piece of land. Who owns the segment of land? This is pretty easy to do in physical land. You can say I own this square of this country, like most people would when they buy a house or something. You can't really have property rights in things like the sea, for example. That's a little bit more difficult to attribute ownership to, because the sea doesn't really have any boundaries, and lots of conflicts involved, and countries debating who owns which piece of land. So that's usually the problem, and this problem usually leads to things like overfishing, because boats can easily kind of move themselves into anywhere to extract fish, and in the process they'll probably do overfishing. They don't have to, they don't have to worry that fish is stocked in the sea. That's not their job, and so that's the answer. Have a little bit more information as to why it's not in any of the other ones down below, so please download that. But in the meantime, C is the answer. Right, here we have a model of the financial crisis. And we have that AD shifted left. Here we have a negative output gap. So we're between A or D. We have a negative output gap because the current output, which is Y2, is lower than the economy's potential, which is Y1. And that's the definition of a negative output gap. So we're between A or D with that. The rest of the impact on the unemployment, you have to think, is this going to be a permanent change? Has the financial crisis permanently altered bank lending? So you'll always have a little bit less bank lending. You'll have to make that judgment if you think it's more likely to show a permanent change, or if it's more of a temporary blip and a fright in the financial market. So based on that judgment, I think, now that we've kind of recovered and bank lending is we still have mortgages, we still have things pretty much back to normal. I think banks are on average a little bit more cautious. They've got a bit stricter regulation, but fundamentally not too much has changed in terms of the employment situation. So that was more of a temporary blip. That was cyclical unemployment. Okay, PS question. It's very common they ask you to rearrange something, so be sure you can quote the equation. It's always quantity on the top. If you ever forget, just quantity on the top. So we're told that this is 4. We're told that this is 10. And we need to find x. So to find x, rearrange that, do 4 times 10, and you get 40. So D is the answer. Right, the short-run Phillips curve is always a graph with inflation on the y-axis. Inflation can be a positive number, it can be 5%, but it could also be a negative number, maybe -2%. That's called deflation. So don't be kind of thrown off by the fact that this goes kind of below the axis. That's fine, inflation can go below that. So the answer is D. In a competitive labor market, firms pay labor according to their MRP, which is a really good measure of how much value they bring to that company. They're a bit sneaky there. They didn't really tell you the full name. Marginal revenue product P is the answer. Okay, multiplier. Be prepared with lots of equations, the possible equations to work this out. You never really know which one they'll ask you. I'm going to write a couple of them down that you need for this one. So 1 over 1 minus MPC. This is one that you need for this one. They give you the MPC, of 0.8, giving you a multiplier of 5. They're asking you for the injection, so you need to use another equation to work that one out. When the multiplier to the change in national income, whoops, I run out of space, and you want to divide that by the injection. So now I can use the knowledge that the multiplier is 5. I don't know what the injection is, but I'm told that the income changes by 350. Rearrange that, 5x equals 350. Get the x by itself. 350 divided by 5 gives you 70 million. So B is the answer for that one. Okay, behavioral economics is all about making biased decisions, making suboptimum decisions, being able to be convinced emotionally on a theory. So we don't really assume people act rationally. We actually kind of study why they might not. And we're trying to understand how humans really do make economic decisions. So behavioral economics is really kind of about that. For those of you that are curious, this is really what traditional economics assumes. For a really long time, behavioral is something that's kind of been a new trend recently, where we've done a lot more research in that area. Keynesian economics is about government intervention to try and recover from recessions and also calm down booms. It's also about the multiplier. There's lots of Keynesian specific theories here. But in the context of this question, we have a recession. We're stuck in a recession. Keynes would argue that it's better for the government to intervene to try and increase the aggregate demand in the economy. So he'd be saying something like, drawing the Keynesian AS curve, by the way, where you would try and increase AD. The government would AD2, and all the terms in AD, we've got C, we've got I, G plus X minus M. According to this theory, the government can directly influence the government spending. So we're looking for more government spending, also possibly lower taxes, because that will help increase consumption. So we are looking for increased government spending. That's good. Increasing taxes, nope. I think C is the only one that works. Everything else is the wrong way around. Okay, how to improve the allocation of resources? Again, stop or reduce consumption of harmful goods and increase consumption of good goods. So A seems like a really good option. Don't think the other ones fit as well as that. Quantity theory of money, great theory. Great theory. This is something that is not really looked into too much often. But here's the equation for it. They've been really nice. To increase inflation, this term is your price term. Higher prices means inflation. So I'm going to rearrange this equation to know what I need to do to increase prices. So that's MV divided by Q. So to get a higher P, all I would need is either higher M, higher V, or lower Q. So here, V would have to increase. You don't really need to know what that is for this one. And the final output, that would have to decrease. So actually the answer is D. Oh, maximizing total output. Okay, they haven't drawn total output. This is just something that you can just kind of learn. Total output is maximized when marginal returns equal 0. And actually not really when, it's at the level of employment where marginal returns equal 0. And that MR marginal returns curve equals 0 at y. Technically, it also equals it at the origin. Don't worry about that. You don't have any employees, so clearly you're not really having the total output. So this one's kind of something trying to distract you. Just be aware that you will have higher output at y. This is just kind of like an unfortunate kind of mix-up here to confuse you a bit. So that would be the answer. Bond prices, these are great. Here it's talking about competition between different kinds of investments. And what they're saying here is investors have two options. There's option A, which is this bond, which is paying £3 on the original £100, so that's paying 3% to the original investor. Then you have option B, which is paying a 6%. So clearly option B is better in terms of maximizing profits. So when B kind of gets kind of launched and introduced to the market, investors are going to switch away from option A and they're going to go to option B. So there's going to be an increase in demand to option B from A. That's going to increase the price of option B, but because demand has fallen for option A, you're going to get a lower price for option A. So here it's asking about that original option, that option A. I'm going to say the price will fall. Based on that, we know the answer is B. To explain why the yield has increased, this is really, really cool. If the price falls, so for example, imagine P2 is £80, it's still paying you £3 per year. So £3 is like 3.75% of £80. So you're getting kind of a higher return on your money if you were to buy the bonds at this period of time compared to if you had purchased it before, so your yield increases. This one's a tricky one, but yeah, we can do it. We can do it. So here at quantity Q, I need to figure out what is happening, whether the firm is making a loss. So let's start with the definitions. So we've got profit is revenue minus costs. Revenue is price times quantity. Costs, I can find that by doing average total cost times quantity. Can factor this like that, and you get a nice kind of profit equation. Right, so at Q, what is the level of profit? So I know Q is Q, how convenient is that one? P is P, great. The average cost at Q is, average total cost is all the way up there. I'm going to call that ATC. So because the cost is higher than the price for all of Q, the company is making a loss. I didn't draw that area super well of that area. So this company is definitely making a loss. Right, everything else is about loss, okay. Great, so will it remain in the market in the long run? No, economic theory says if you're making a loss overall, that means you'll be better off by shutting down your firm instead of paying more losses and more losses and more losses. So A is wrong. It's making a profit. We've just found it is not making a profit. It's actually making a loss. Will it exit the market immediately? This one's really interesting. The problem is this company can actually pay for its variable resources. If you look here, its variable costs were only there. So it was actually managing to sell this product. Imagine these pieces. They were selling them for £7, but the pieces themselves cost them £5, so they're making a profit of £2 on each piece. Which means the more pieces you produce, the better your profits. Sorry, you make a profit of £2 per pizza you make, which is really good. You want to produce more. So we know that this company will want to produce more pizzas. But we also know that overall, they're making a loss if you include their fixed costs. So this company has a dilemma. They know they can make a profit per pizza, but they can't make a profit including the rent and all the other kinds of fixed costs that we haven't included yet. So what is the best decision? This company should make pizzas. It's December now, for all of December, and quit at the end of December. That way, it doesn't have to pay rent for January, and it knows that it will never be able to pay off its rent in January. But it's been able to pay off some of the rent payments in December, not all of them, but it's helped to stay in the market. So this company will not exit immediately. They will actually like to make some pizzas until the end of December. There's the answer. Okay, great questions, great questions. Whenever you're given a real value, here's how to work it out. Any real value, it doesn't matter what it is. You take the nominal value of that, the nominal GDP, and then you divide it by, hopefully you're given data exactly like this. You might get it a bit different, but take your CPI index and then divide it by 100. Here, luckily, you are given your CPI index. I don't really tell you directly. They're a bit sneaky. That's your CPI index. Right, so let's work out the real GDP for 2005. So I would do the nominal one, which is 100. Then I divide it by the CPI, so 100. Then I need to divide it by 102. And if I do this, I'm going to get 1. So the real GDP in 2005, let me write it in the column, is 100. And then I'm going to repeat. For 2014, that real GDP is your nominal value of 200. Divide that by the CPI index of 150. Divide that again by 100. Ooh, 200 divided by 1.5. What is this? Possibly 1. No, it's not. Hang on, I need my calculator for this one. $200 divided by 1.5, 133. Right, so I'm not done yet. I've just calculated the real GDP. Let me write that down in the table. Want you to work out the real GDP per capita. So what is that? You take your real GDP, divide that by your population size. So let's add another column. Real GDP per capita. So I would do for 2005, I would do 100 divided by the population of 100, and I get a real GDP per capita of 1. And then you repeat for 2014. Your real GDP is 133. And that wasn't a 3. And then you divide it by your population of 120. And this was still 1.1. I know this, I've worked these out, the solutions below if you would like them. If you work out the percentage change, the percentage increase in the real GDP, we would do the new value minus the old value divided by the old value, and then times this by 100. You will get an 11% increase in real GDP per capita, which is approximately 10%. So A is the answer. Right, let's write down some of these relationships. So here we have growth has increased. We have unemployment has fallen. And we have inflation has fallen too. So what could cause all of this? I'll draw a graph. I think the most likely thing drawing the Keynesian AS for those that have questions. No particular reason, doesn't really matter too much. Price level, real GDP. This is your AD. So this will create growth. Your output will increase from Y1 to Y2. So there is growth. Hopefully with more growth, like, companies are selling more stuff. That's going to mean more people have probably been employed. Kind of depends. It depends a bit, but probably more people are employed. So therefore unemployment falls, or after full. So that is good. Inflation has fallen. Yeah, if you look at the prices, they've gone from P1 to P2. So the takeaway is we are looking for an AS curve shifting right. What can shift your AS curve? You need to look at more quantity or factors of production or a higher quality factors of production. So anything like a new technology, any spending on education, maybe better health, that would all work. So B seems to be the answer. If you have more productivity, such as because of education, that will change your AS curve and lead to all those benefits that we see in the table, hopefully. This one, I looked at this one, I thought it was a bit sneaky. So A, movement from X to Y results in an improvement in productive efficiency. Wrong. Everywhere on here is already productively efficient. So don't forget that. A is wrong. Okay, so let's go with the next one at point X. Producing 20 more tons of wheat. So that would mean going from there to there. So that means moving from, I've already used all the letters in the alphabet, X to A. Okay, what's the opportunity cost? So for a refresh, opportunity cost is like a fancy definition for this, but basically it means what you sacrifice in choosing your preferred option. Right, so by going from X to A, so choosing the 20 wheat, what has been sacrificed? So if you look here, the company could previously make 40 barley, and now they make 0 barley. So they've sacrificed 40 barley. So B is the answer. If you'd like more information on that, look at the solutions. Hopefully that explains that really clearly. Here we have a monopoly price discriminating. Just like any other monopoly, to maximize profits, they're going to produce where MC equals MR. That would be at this output. And that would be at this output. So the peak travel market, that's the V. And the off-peak market, that's the X, giving you an answer of A. So I hope that was really helpful, and see you soon. Bye.